Fantastic. Well, thank you for coming as we get a few stragglers coming through. So can I just have a quick show of hands just to make sure you guys are in the right room? Hands up those who are developers or architects who are on the dev side of that. Fantastic. Hands up those who are infrastructure and operations. All right. It's great to have the enemy here. We really welcome you. So it's really good, but if you'd actually sit on the left side of the house and all the devs on the right, that'd be great. So my name's Ben Henshall, and I'm, as you can tell, I'm Australian, but I actually live in Singapore. And I have the wonderful privilege of travelling up and down, as I say, the Asia-Pacific coast. So as far as Korea, not quite North Korea. I haven't managed to get there yet. And then across to India, and then to ASEAN and Japan, and obviously China and Hong Kong. And if I sound a little bit strange, it's because I've come off a 10-hour flight from Hong Kong and landed at 8 o'clock this morning. And in good Red Hat cost savings model, I've flown economy class. So as you can tell, I probably had about 3 hours sleep. So we're going to be talking about, let me just get this clicker. We're going to be let me go back. We're going to be talking about building modern applications using the next generation platforms, which is a bit of a mouthful. There's three things that I need to do today. The first one is I need to make sure that you do not look at your mobile phone. So my challenge is that I actually need to be more engaging than your wildly distracting device called the mobile phone. The second is that I need to make sure that you don't fall asleep. The third thing is that at the end of this, even if my talk is completely and utterly stupid or you don't like it, we all need to do a big, loud clap and scream because my counterpart is doing a talk on the other side of that petition. And he's my arch enemy, and he's from Florida, which, nothing much good comes out of Florida. So at the end, I'm going to ask you to really clap and scream, just so that he knows that my talk was better than his, even if it wasn't. Is that all right? Okay, great, fantastic. So before we go on, I just want to talk about the fact that Red Hat has a philosophy about how we do software. We call it the next generation architecture to support today and tomorrow's business models. Now, it's supported by three pillars. Now, Joe alluded to that today around process, platform, and architecture. We sort of slightly put a few more words onto it, but it's effectively the same thing. And that is having an agile infrastructure, which is, we've been doing that for the last 10 years. The green box is the application architecture. We call it integration automation with mobile. And then the third is around how you actually do software development and operations, known as DEVOPS. But can I just say that what I see across Asia Pacific in particular is that we've really focused on the green box, but we haven't really thought too much about, the blue box, but we haven't thought too much about the yellow and the green box. We're going to be talking predominantly around about the green box today, about how to do application development, and a little bit with DevOps. But the thing is that these are interdependent. Now, we've all had a virtualization strategy, right? It's basically take cost out. And now we're actually looking about how do we actually do software development to support this thing as digital transformation. Now, I don't really need to go over this because we've already covered that. And I think the thing is, we get the message, right? When I talk to CIOs and heads of delivery, and I was talking to the head of the hospital division within Hong Kong 2 days ago at the Red Hat Forum in Hong Kong, and the fact that, they're using open source, they're trying to be really, really innovative in the way that they address basically patient outcome. So they get the message. You get the message we need to change, and digital transformation is doing that. And we talk about software. You've probably seen this quote, Ford's done the same, Volvo's done the same, BMW has done the same in the car industry, which is just going through a major reformation. But when we boil everything down, team, and if I can speak as we're friends, because the other thing that my job is to really get you passionately excited to go back to your constituencies and your stakeholders and get them bought into the idea of how to become a lean, mean software development and delivery machine. Because if we just take the car, for instance, the fact is that if I'm a taxi driver, my job's really on the line. It's as simple as that. And the thing that's transforming it is, yes, the car's still there, but what's driving the taxi? Software. Now, in Singapore, they're starting the autonomous car already in a certain section on the island. And once regulation gets passed, and it's going to take some time, and the taxi drivers will get very, very angry about it, as they did in France, right? But it is going to fundamentally change. So how do we do software in a very, very lean, mean way? And it's called the modern app, right? Now, I did COBOL at university, and I sucked at it for good reason. And so that's not sufficient for today. We kind of know that. And this is kind of our problem. This is the metaphor. Now, I've shown this around the world, not around the world, I've shown this around Asia Pacific. And it accurately describes the problem. And that is, we're trying to get code out the door. How do you as an organization get code out the door in the most expeditious way? Right? We all want to be like, doing 10 deploys a day, like Allspore and Hammond when they talked about it at Velocity in 2009, right? Which introduced effectively the DevOps story. And I'm not trying to say that your architecture is bad. I'm honestly not. If we look at that limousine, it is a gorgeous piece of engineering. It is beautiful. And it will eventually help, or it will eventually get to the destination. But it won't do it in an expeditious way. What we need is a Tesla, or we need a Toyota, right? And the problem is with that architecture, it's got all these features, but we don't really need a whole lot of them. Some of them we do. We need beautiful resilience. We need great redundancy, those sorts of things. But it's not going to help us get our code out the door with this current architecture. And so this is why we call it the next generation architecture to support today's and tomorrow's business models. And the characteristics of that modern app that need a new platform and need a new architecture, and Joe alluded to them, really are these 5 characteristics: modular, lightweight, secure, connected, and cloud native. Now that's a little bit of a mouthful, but let me just give you a story of contrast, particularly for the devs who would know this. There is an application server, and I'm not trying to pick on this vendor. I'm honestly not into vendor bashing, but I'm just doing this as a story of contrast. To download and install the application server, you needed a 2 gig installer before you'd actually install the application server. And there's a couple of smiles in the room because they've had that situation, right? And then you had 4 gigs to install the application server, let alone before you'd actually started developing something. Now that is just not going to run in the cloud. And this vendor is rebuilding their application server because it's just not suited for the modern app, right? It's just common sense. Modularity, lightweightness. There's another BPM sort of tool. You needed to have their application server, you needed to have their LDAP server, you needed to have their database, you needed to have their SOA platform, and then you had the BPM tool there, right? Now that's just not lightweight, right? Let alone the licensing issues with that. And again, I'm not trying to bash our frenemies, so to speak. I'm just trying to say that an architecture is not suited for that agility. That's the limousine problem we've got, right? It's just not going to get code out the door. Security is a huge thing, particularly when we talk about heterogeneous architectures on cloud, on-premise, off-cloud, right? And then cloud native. So how does it have that elasticity? And the architectures of this that are driving these new apps, and Joe alluded to this morning as well, are microservices, integration patterns, which we'll talk a little bit about, API-centric and obviously user-first, that empathetic user, because systems of engagement are really driving that. And can I also just say that when I talked... Well, let me back up. Hands up those who are doing microservices in anger, like really doing microservices. Yeah? Another one? So we've got about 2, 3 organizations doing microservices. Now this is very similar to what I have around across the region. The only reason you want to do microservices is because you want to improve the velocity of your code out the door. Because if you don't have that requirement, then don't do microservices. As cool, as sexy, and as so many vendors are talking about it, it's not the panacea. It's a business-driven requirement. You want to get code out fast because you want to have more modularity, more independence, and more scalability, particularly with these systems of engagement type apps that need that elasticity based on workloads. And integration, my gosh, it's come back. There's been this plethora of new integration vendors that have been birthed in the last sort of 5 years. It's fantastic. Some of them are competitors of ours, but it's fantastic because when we talk about connecting systems of record to systems of engagement, and we're talking about having partnerships, open collaboration, you need to break down your internal silos, right? That's what sort of SOA was trying to do. But integration, how we do it, needs to be done a different way because it's just not fast enough. And then obviously APIs so that they're well-defined and then having that empathetic interaction. And then there's been this other thing that's been introduced and was alluded to this morning is containers. Hands up those who are doing containers right now, Linux containers. Yeah? Couple? Yeah? That's great. So about 2 years ago, not that many. If you were using OpenShift a couple of years ago, you were using containers, you just didn't quite know about it. But this has been phenomenal because it's leapfrogged the VM. And you don't want to have a microservice deployed onto a VM. You don't need the 4 gig or 16 gig, right? It's just not useful. Besides, the consolidation and rationalization of infrastructure, compute, storage, and memory that containers affords you is just breathtaking. Cisco have got 15-to-1 collapsing of VMs down to 1 and still running 15 apps using containers on OpenShift. So with the modern app, the characteristics of this are those 5 areas of connected, modular, lightweight, cloud-native, and secure, but the immediacy and the pervasiveness of it. I mean, hands up those who've downloaded an app on your phone and then within 5 minutes you've deleted it. Right. Okay. And this is the thing, right? We're driving this requirement. We understand that if you want to have an engaging experience, it's got to be real quick. Hands up those who've tried to book, say, a trip or some sort of itinerary on your mobile phone, say using Expedia or Zuji or whatever, right? Yeah. Is it a pleasant experience? It's crap, right? It's awful. Sorry, I really figured I'm in Australia. I can say sometimes rude words. It's bad though, right? And this is the thing. When it's done well, the adoption just goes crazy. What's the latest example where it just went nuts? It's a game. Pokemon, right? Right? I mean, my kids are playing it. Everyone in Singapore's bumping into each other. But when it hits, it's amazing. But we want that immediacy. And this is the capabilities that are needed to drive and build these new next generation applications to support what you and I are demanding. And this is nothing new, guys. Ladies and gentlemen, this is nothing new. I'm not purporting to you some amazing PhD rocket scientist architecture here. Data integration, virtualization, mediation, called an ESB, right? Messaging application servers, business rules, complex event processing, artificial intelligence, workflow management, and then that last mile is the mobile and wrapped around with APIs. The problem is that we've tried to do that, but we've done it with software and applications or middleware tools that are not well suited to those characteristics, right? They're big and clunky. So Red Hat can help, of course we can. And the reason why Red Hat can help address this next generation architecture, and you for developers and you for operations and you for architects, is because the fundamental intrinsic aspect to all of Red Hat software is built in the cloud. That's what open source is. Open source doesn't tolerate bloatware. If you need to download a 2 gig installer, then to install a 4 gig application server before you actually start doing something, you're not going to go there. You're going to go to Tomcat, aren't you? Or you're going to go to JBOSS. And so intrinsically, all our stuff is designed in the cloud. It's called GitHub, which means it can be deployed in a hybrid environment. It's got those characteristics of lightweight, connected, modular, etc. Hands up those, or somebody throw me out a number. How many open source projects do you think make up our application server, JBOSS Enterprise Application Platform? Somebody want to have a guess? Come on. 2? What else did I hear? 20. Let's keep going. 600 was it? 400. No. Not quite that many. Not quite that many. We had... hello, Mike. Hello. We had... It's about 45 projects, just in the application server. But the beautiful thing about our application server is that you can turn off a whole lot of those services that you don't need, which makes it very lightweight. And when you take all of our JBOSS components that are sitting there on the left, and then you containerize them, and you put them on a highly productive developer platform that Rajay Ray talked about on OpenShift, then you really open up the art of the possible. You are releasing the developer, so to speak. Now, I have a saying, that is the developer is the artisan of the 21st century business. Let me say that again. The developer is the artisan of the 21st century business. And we've just heard example after example. And I've known Rajay a long time. I love what he said. He says, our competition is not another bank. Our competition is where your attention span is going, called the next app. That's their competition, which forces you to think about how you build superbly rich and engaging applications, i.e. called the modern app. And we're using something like OpenShift can enable developers and get out of the way, right? And so when you put a DevOps strategy together, having devs and ops together, and I really, really love the fact that we've got ops here today. It's awesome. It's fantastic. Who want to learn more about what it's like to be a developer. Is that when you have that team at the bottom, using your IDE and your continuous integration server and what have you, and then you've got OpenShift that sits on top, and you have that continuous feedback. You have a common platform to have a discussion between dev and ops. I mean, hands up those who've had, particularly in the operations, where you've had dependency hell. Something's gone wrong, right? And you're just trying to figure out, how do I have a conversation with the developer who's high-fived himself and he's out to drinks on a Friday night and the system's gone down? Or you're trying to get that release out on a Sunday night before it all goes crazy on Monday, hoping all the green lights come up. How do you have a common conversation? Well, this really helps that. And this is from Cisco's presentation in 2015 at Red Hat Summit in June. And they use OpenShift, just as an example. Over 1,500 apps that they'd built in less than 2 years. Now, what's one of the major existential crises that Cisco is going through right now? Are they selling more routers? No. Why? What's disrupting them? What's one of the things that's disrupting them? Yeah, software. Software-defined networking. So what are they doing to fight back? They're becoming a software company. So they've got 4,000, 5,000 Java developers. And the beautiful thing about containers is that it's not specific to Java. You can see here's a bunch of different frameworks. So it really does let the developer free. And when we talk about then how do we break apart the monolith and do microservices, the beautiful thing about that is that the container is the perfect place to go and host it. And then when you want to scale that thing, because you've got a gazillion users downloading your next Pokemon app, smashing your application or smashing your database or your services, your login service on a Monday, this thing orchestrates it beautifully and takes care of all the engineering that you as systems administrators would have to try and figure out yourself. Now, for those who don't know too much about, let me ask this. Anybody heard of Kubernetes? Yep. Okay, great. We've got quite a few. I mean, Kubernetes is their third generation container orchestration engine. So they do 2 billion containers a week. Every time you hit Gmail, it's hitting a container. And it's being orchestrated and scheduled effectively from Kubernetes. So they really know how to do container orchestration, right? And then you add our next generation application server, version 7 of JBOSS, Enterprise Application Platform, which is designed and been re-engineered to run in a container. So it's a container in a container, if you will. Java container. You then get this beautiful developer productivity and this ability to set the developer free, so to speak, and operations aren't having this dependency hell issue. One of the things that Red Hat spent a lot of time on, I've been at Red Hat almost 9 years, is that we didn't do too much on user experience. Anybody used Red Hat back in 2007? Like Linux, yeah? Our user experience, our interface, was it excellent? Was it a beautiful, elegant experience? No. Okay, so we probably had one part-time UX guy. We've now got a lot of them, heaps of them, because we're trying to basically, put a nice code on the front of it. And this is some of the developer productivity that you're getting out of it, right? And then, because data is now becoming an even more, a greater requirement to have that rich and fast interactive engagement, particularly on the mobile phone, you need to basically stop hitting the database and put data in an elastic sort of cache. And how do you do that on the cloud? And so this is where a tool like JBOSS Data Grid really supports that natively. So we've talked about Java application development with JBOSS. We talked about microservices. Well, let's just talk about integration and business process. Now, Hands up those who've done handcrafting integration at a code level, right? Built your own, done your own integration sort of framework, right? It's fantastic if you want to become the single source of truth. It's fantastic if you want to maintain your job because you are, all roads lead to you. But it doesn't really scale, does it? The alternative is, and this is what happened with other vendors, is you would get a proprietary GUI, right, that would hide some of the complexity. So we've all used those tools, and I'm not saying it's necessarily bad. It was trying to take away that complexity because as once, you know, there's I don't know if you've heard of this saying. A CEO once said, when an integration project succeeds, I don't know why. When an integration project fails, I still don't know why, right? It's a dark art, integration, and it's not like it's going away. It's becoming ever more a requirement, particularly around application architectures, because applications don't operate in a silo anymore. They need that interdependency. We have a saying at Red Hat called the virtual, private, transparent business, because businesses are now needing to partner and collaborate a lot better if they want to create new value chains. And the way that you do that is through software. And if you don't do integration well, then somebody else is going to integrate with somebody else and not you. An example is Amadeus. It used to take them 2 years to integrate a new hotel chain for their reservation system. They now use JBOSS and they're using OpenShift. It takes them months. So they were able to onboard a new business partner in months versus 2 years. Now just think of the return that gives to shareholders. So we have these two dichotomy, right? You can either hand code it or you can use a proprietary GUI. But when problems arise, you still actually need to decipher what. Is a GUI going to help you decipher or triage your problem? It doesn't. It might have given you that sugar hit to give you some developer productivity immediately with that drag-droppy thing. But when you have that triage and you're trying to decipher what's going on, you actually still need to understand what's going on in the code. Do you not? Hands up those who've used a GUI trying to triage a production issue with integration and had great success. Sometimes it works, but do you still really need to understand the code? Because it's a dark art. And this is where the enterprise integration patterns. Anybody heard of the enterprise integration patterns? From Bobby Wolf, Gregor Hope, yeah? So if you haven't, recommend you go and get the book. It's the Bible of integrations. There's about 60 patterns. You know, content-based routing, enrichment, guaranteed delivery, these sorts of things. And these patterns are not language dependent, but they're designed so that it's like Spring. What Spring was for Java, enterprise integration patterns is for integration. And a couple of guys in about 2006 called Jonathan Anstey and Klaus Ibsen, they got together and they implemented those patterns in a Java framework. And it's called Camel. Anybody heard of Camel? Yeah? Not many people. Not many people, really? Come on, don't leave me out. Come on, don't leave me out here. Thank you. Okay. Anybody using Camel? Don't be shy. Come on, come on. No one's using Camel. It's like Hibernate. It's everywhere. Maybe not in Sydney. Anybody ridden a camel? It's not very comfortable. So the enterprise integration patterns were implemented in a framework, a Java framework called Camel, and that's what's called JBOSS Fuse. Now, this is really, really productive and really powerful for 5 main reasons. Because it's a framework, you don't have to come up with your own integration patterns. It's there out of the box. So it immediately gives you that developer productivity. The second is that because it's Java, you don't need to go and learn a new language. You don't need to learn a new framework, so to speak. You don't need to learn a new skill. It's an extension of what you do already in Java. Hands up those who do Java development here. Any Java developers? Come on, come on. We're all friends. Let's put our hands up. Yeah? Hands up those who are .NET developers. Fantastic. Great to have you here. So I'm going to convert you. But it's not either or, it's both and, right? It's a bit like being able to speak 2 languages. You become more powerful. But it's Java-based, so you don't need to learn a new language, which means the onboarding and finding skills just drops away. The third is that because it's Java-based, it scales magnificently, and it's designed for microservices. So if you go to Red Hat's website and look up microservices, JBOSS views, you'll see some webinars there talking about how to do that. The fourth is that because it's open source and it's Java, it's transparent. So if you've got an issue that you're trying to debug, because that happens all the time, you can actually see what's going in the code, as opposed to being prevented through a GUI, or trying to understand, this complex XML language that was designed by a proprietary company. And the fifth is, because it's got about 60 patents, it supports the most richest and sophisticated integration requirements that you have. Now, some of these newer vendors that have come out with integration is that they support a subset of these types of patterns. And the problem with that is it does about 80% of your use cases, but that last 20% is the area that's a real pain in the butt that the business needs fixed. And so this is where the enterprise integration patterns supports that rich and sophisticated use cases that you have. And we all know, because we are demanding it, that if you want to have a rich and engaging and sophisticated and empathetic interface, you have to have that integration behind the scenes to be able to support that. Putting a HTML5 skin on some data through a mobile phone is not a systems of engagement app. That's not a mobile strategy. You need to have that previous slide I showed, all the layers that you needed to have. This is what we're talking about, having a sophisticated integration capability. And if you don't believe me about some of the productivity gains and what some customers are deriving out of using JBOSS views for this, using it in a hybrid cloud model, running it either in the cloud or on-premise, well, here's a report. Now, okay, admittedly, it's IDC and Red Hat paid for it, but it's worth reading because it interviews 6 companies and it talks about their journey from proprietary integration to using this. And these are not small organizations, average size, 90,000 employees. I mean, they've got integration requirements, right? It's not like it's a mum and dad shop. And then as we think about integration, we think about how we do that in a productive way, then obviously the API aspect to it. Hands up those who've heard of 3Scale. A couple of people? Yeah. Hands up those who've got a definitive API strategy. Yeah? No one else has got a definitive API strategy? Yeah? Yeah? Sort of? Yeah? Hands up those who are developing an API strategy. Right. Okay. And I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but my experience with this, and it's just my personal experience, is that a little bit like what SOA was trying to do and it didn't deliver on it. Obviously, then people have gone out and said, great, let's go and get an API management tool, and therefore we've got an API strategy. And I haven't heard organizations go, we have an awesome, engaging, rich, sophisticated API strategy that we're executing on, and it's working for us. There's a great paper that I really recommend you read, and I should have put it up on the slide. It's called the API Owner's Manual. If you go to 3Scale or Red Hat's website, or 3Scale because I think it's still up as a microsite, and search for the API Owner's Manual, it talks about 7 aspects to developing and designing your API strategy. And most of it is not really to do with the nuts and bolts of how you do APIs at the technical level. It talks about the aspect of mapping the API strategy to the business context, making sure that you have the right marketing, making sure that you have the right evangelists and building the right community, making sure that you have the great developer experience, and then also the life cycle of your APIs that you've got. And this is one of the reasons why we acquired 3Scale. I mean, personally, it took Red Hat a while to, finally get over the fact that we needed to acquire an API management tool. Just being very frank with you, we finally got around to it. And these guys are fantastic because they have avoided a lot of the architectural and runtime issues that previous API management sort of tools or vendors had had. It runs on the cloud. It's got a great developer portal. It's really designed around the API economy and the monetization, if that's one of the things that you want to do. It's got a fantastic lightweight gateway, 2 ways that you can run that. So when you bring these things together, you are being able to then set the developer free, open up the art of the possible, build modern applications and get that code out real quick, which is really what it's about. So you might say, okay, great, Ben, got me interested. What do I do? Download your stuff and give it a go, or what do I do? Well, in years gone by, we would have said, yep, great, buy some Red Hat subscriptions and we'll give you a little bit of consulting and a bit of training and off you go. Good luck. And that worked to some degree, particularly when we were one-trick pony selling Linux, but it doesn't work when we're building applications. And particularly when you're thinking about how do you bring together developer and operations to ensure that you are owning products, not projects. And this is what DevOps has all made us wake up and see, that we want to own an outcome, a business outcome. Because if the code is not delivering business value, then it's everybody's problem, right? It's the developer's problem, it's the line of business's problem, it's the operations problem, it's InfoSec's problem. And so we've got this DevOps maturity workshop, discovery workshop that we do. It's a series of questions. We get the people from dev, ops, infrastructure, and the line of business together. It's a methodology we go through. It takes about a day and a half, and we assess your maturity against the Gartner maturity model for doing DevOps. And we understand what your development process is and your mapping to the business. And it's a really great way. We provide then a report to you, back to you, and say, okay, here's where you are in terms of that maturity, and here's where you want to get to with these certain time frames, and here's some suggestions about how Red Hat can help you. But it's effectively a free sort of litmus test exercise for you guys to assess where you are at with doing modern application development. And the purpose is really about this is to make sure that we're aligned with your business and your outcomes. Superior outcomes, reduce the risk, get there faster. Because the thing about Red Hat, and I'll close with this, is that if I'm a sales guy, great, I'd love to sell you a $10 million deal and off we go, thanks. But the Red Hat model does not work that way. We cannot do that. We have to work at you getting an outcome because it is based on a subscription. That's the beauty of it. It keeps us honest. And the way we do this, particularly when we're talking about modern application development, is understanding how you do software development. Because if we don't understand your maturity model, we don't understand where you're at in terms of your ability to adopt, say, something like containers or modern application development using APIs, then prescribing that to you a tool may not be sufficient or appropriate at this point in time. And that's what this discovery workshop's trying to address. So if you'd like to know more about that, then please come and talk to Red Hat, the local Sydney guys, or Australia, if you're from other cities. So with that, I saw a couple of guys looking at their phones, and I've got you marked, but that's okay. And I haven't seen anybody sleep. So can we please make a big noise, even if you thought it was really bad, to make sure that James Labaki next door heard that our salt was better than his. So thank you.